Good morning, friends. I appreciate you. I think it's getting up earlier or something. I'm not sure how exactly it works on Spring Forward Day, but thank you for being here. I just really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my spiritual journey with you. Now, in the fundamentalist and evangelical traditions, which were for a time my spiritual homes, we would call this instead sharing my testimony, right? Um, I must say that I prefer the concept of sharing my spiritual journey because it more clearly implies that the journey is not yet finished. Some of you may remember a few years ago, Jane Fonda wrote a book, and that book was entitled My Life So Far. And so I would prefer to think of this as my spiritual journey so far. Thanks to Ellen and Michael Cronin for the invitation to do this, and to Rosalind for sending out in advance my spiritual autobiography, which is a little bit different, and to Jeremy for taping and hosting. Thank you. I'm making two assumptions today. First, I'm assuming that you're probably most interested in my spiritual journey so far as it relates to how I came to Quakerism. And that is an area I was not able to cover in my spiritual autobiography because of the time and space constraints that we were under in that particular course. Second, because we have limited time today, I need to assume that you have hopefully read my spiritual autobiography already. It provides the larger context for what I'm going to share with you today. When we get to the Q&A part of this, which I intend to have, the Q&A part, I will happily entertain questions on either the autobiography or on the spiritual journey. So let's begin at the beginning. Seems like a good place. I grew up on a farm near Morning Sun, Iowa. Today, Morning Sun has a population of just over 700 people, but when I was growing up there in the 50s and 60s, it had a booming population of about 900. It has always been a very small southeast Iowa town located about 20 miles from the Mississippi River. There are actually four reasonably famous people who claim Morning Sun as their hometown. Three are sports figures. Clifford Roberts is the first sports figure who, with golfer Bobby Jones, built Augusta National Golf Course and founded the Masters Tournament. Unfortunately, and that was in 1934 that all that happened. And unfortunately, Clifford was also well known to be quite the racist. Then there was Jack Hamilton, a Major League Baseball player who in 1967 became infamous for throwing the pitch that hit upcoming Red Sox star Tony Conigliaro in the side of the head and blinded him. And after that, Major League Baseball came out with the hard helmets with the ear tabs. That was the incident that caused that change. And then finally, there is Tim Johnson, who rode the bus to school with me every day. He was among my 23 other graduates, classmates of the graduating class of 1972, and he's still my friend. Tim was an outstanding wrestler and coach. He is recognized today as the voice of college wrestling on Big Ten and ESPN broadcasts of college wrestling, where he's better known as TJ. And if you are following college wrestling this weekend, there's a big tournament up in Penn State, and Tim is one of the broadcasters on that. Now, the fourth person was a Quaker. And this is unusual because there is no Quaker meeting within 45 miles of Morning Sun, Iowa. He was born in 1896, and he attended school with Clifford Roberts. Remember the guy who started the Masters Tournament. However, he died at age 90 at a friend's house here in Sandy Spring. He was E. Raymond Wilson, one of the founders and longtime executive director of the Friends Committee for National Legislation. Some of you may know him. I see some heads nodding, right? And some of you remember him. I do not, although I know that I knew some of his distant relatives. Now, I'm the youngest of four children. I'm the only boy. My parents practiced extraordinary child spacing, by the way. Very healthy thing. My oldest sister is 20 years older than me. My middle sister is 15 years older than me. My youngest sister is 10 years older than me. My middle sister was passed away shortly after my mother died in 2006. Now, my two oldest sisters, this is one of the mysteries of my family, that my two oldest sisters were raised as Lutherans, and my youngest sister and I were raised as Methodists. Why? I have no clue. It remains a mystery. During my high school years, I became involved with a youth movement known as Campus Life, which was the school club division of an organization known as Youth for Christ, or YFC. The organization was evangelical and evangelistic, and some of you may have had some interaction with it. By the time I finished high school, I was rising in leadership with the organization, and that led to my first preaching opportunity with a small church outside of town at the age of 16. When I graduated from high school, I went to work as a staff member for Youth for Christ. Now, college was not a consideration for me, given my family circumstances and my below average grades. Yes, I had way below average grades. A lot going on in my family, and I'm sure that that played a major role in my inability to really focus and concentrate in school. Nonetheless, I decided to leave YFC to go to college after a theological and ideological split in YFC nationally. My local YFC program threw in with a conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical splinter group based in Kansas City. Over time, though, I came to realize there was more going on than just that. It was while I was attending an annual gathering in Kansas City that I realized the movement had turned into what we would call today a white Christian nationalist movement. In fact, at that meeting, I met Jerry Falwell when he was just starting Liberty University, before he launched the Moral Majority, and before he became the Jerry Falwell. It was something he said in a speech to us that told me that I was not in the right place. The gist of his words were this: we must work together toward the time when God is again the head of our country and Christians have the power. He might be very pleased today. Going to school was not easy for me. Education was not a value in my family. In fact, I was the first to attend college from not just my immediate family, but among many of my cousins as well. Without support from my family, I was finally able to earn an associate's degree in 81, my bachelor's degree in 1988, my master's in 1991, and then 22 years later, earned my PhD. All of my education was earned as a non-traditional student, and after acquiring alpine level mountains of student debt. And it's embarrassing that I had to acquire that much debt. And then I'm proud to say I finally paid off all my student debt by the age of 65. It's like a house, right? Woo. Yeah. After leaving YFC in 1975, I enrolled at Friends Bible College, now Barclay College, at the urging of a Quaker friend from YFC, who assured me I'd have no trouble getting in because, in his words, they take anyone. Now, my time at Friends Bible College was my first real introduction to Quakerism, which is sometimes surprising and a bit disconcerting to unprogrammed friends. I have come to realize, though, that Professor Elaine Mock's Quaker history class provided a fair representation and assessment of Quaker history. One of my best friends, by the way, and classmates there was Ron Ferguson, who, as I've been told, and some of you may know Ron, was fairly recently chair of the board of FCNL. As a married student, I lived off campus. I was able to cover the cost of school and housing for only a year, while working two part-time jobs that added up to a full-time job. After that, I returned to a YFC program in Northern Illinois that had not fully aligned with the far-right splinter group. As that YFC program was slowly losing funding and moving closer toward the more white nationalist group, I decided to leave. Because my dad encouraged me to stop playing with kids and get a real job, I reached out to the general superintendent of the Iowa Yearly Meeting of Friends. there was a pastoral opening at Stavanger Friends Church in central Iowa. Now, Stavanger was an independent Friends church with an amazing history that has been written up in a number of Quaker books. And I hope you'll take the time to look it up. It's named after Stavanger, Norway, where the folks came from. It was originally an unprogrammed meeting started by these Norwegian immigrants and affiliated with Iowa Yearly Meeting Conservative. And it was there that I actually met my first unprogrammed Quakers who would often visit friends and family, and somebody's trying to get in the door there, friends and family, as they were passing through to yearly meeting, which was typically held in Polina, Iowa. And some would attend wearing the simple clothing of bygone years, the bonnets and the broad brim hats, and they would sit with men on one side and women on the other, when many years before, men and women had been mixed in the congregation. Now, I must have shown some promise for pastoral ministry during this time, which was surprising to me, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I was recruited by Howard Macy to study under him and Richard Foster at Friends University in Wichita. D. Elton Trueblood, whom some of you may be familiar with that name, also offered to be my personal mentor when I met with him at his office on the campus of Earlham College, if I agreed to attend Earlham College and Earlham School of Religion. Truthfully, though, I did not enjoy pastoral work. And I felt I was pretty bad at it. And at that point, age 23, I was probably really pretty bad at it. I looked for an opportunity to return to youth work. And at first that came through working as a volunteer at Young Friends Camp at Quaker Heights as part of Iowa Yearly Meeting. Then it came through an opening at the Iowa Yearly Meeting when they needed to hire a new director of youth and Christian education. I applied and I was hired for the position, which I held for over a decade. During that time, I was also responsible for planning and leading the Iowa Yearly Meeting summer youth camping program at Quaker Heights and Young Friends events for our churches in Iowa, Minnesota, and Minnesota. And actually, Minneapolis Friends Meeting at that time was a part of Iowa Yearly Meeting. Now, I was appointed by, I was also able at that time, that's when I was able to finish my bachelor's degree at William Penn University with a double major in religion and English. Iowa Yearly Meeting appointed me as a representative and committee member to Friends United meeting. And it was during this time that I got to know Frank Massey. I was still strongly leaning toward evangelicalism with shades of fundamentalism during this time. So you might imagine Frank's surprise when he and Beth moved back here from North Carolina and walked into meeting one day and saw me sitting in meeting. It was a bit of a shock to me. During this time, I began to write at the encouragement of my friend Brent Bill, who held a similar position as mine in Western Yearly Meeting in Indiana. I wrote numerous articles for Christian Youth Ministry magazines, 2 books, co-authored a 3rd book with my close friend Lamar Roth, and was a contributor to the Youth Bible. I love that because I could always tell people I wrote the Bible. Okay, a very small part of the Bible. One of my books was a finalist for a major Christian publishing award and was translated and published in Germany, which I was very pleased with. The move into writing was served me well later on in my career, where I wrote curriculum grants, research papers, and a myriad of reports. The Iowa Yearly Meeting Ministry and Council wanted to record me for pastoral ministry during this time, and I refused because I knew from my previous experience that I was not a good fit and I did not want to try it again in my lifetime. Still, they wanted to record me. I compromised by allowing them to record me for public ministry. Some of you may know or have heard of Judy Brooks. She was a good friend and mentor to me, and she was also recorded for public ministry at the same. And to the best of my knowledge, I think we are the only 2 to be recorded for public ministry in the history of Iowa Yearly Meeting FUM. Judy, as some of you may know, also played a significant role in helping Wendy Cooler, sitting back there, define her work and ministry. And Judy was just a precious gift to me, and I also know to Wendy as well. During this period, my counterpart in the California Yearly Meeting, Billy Lewis, started something called Youth Quake. Billy's vision, and this was lost over the years, but Billy's vision was that Youth Quake would become a place where Quaker youth from all traditions would come together to learn from one another, worship together, and build lasting relationships. Billy stepped out of his role with California Yearly Meeting after the second Youth Quake event, and Royce Frazier of Kansas Yearly Meeting, who retired just last year as the president of Berkeley College, and I were asked to take over leadership. Somebody's going to have to open the door there. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. So Royce and I were asked to take over leadership of the Youth Quake Planning Committee. This planning committee is where I met and became friends with Sheila Bach of Baltimore Yearly Meeting, and Jonathan Snipes of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and Chris Jorgensen of New England Yearly Meeting, and other representatives to the committee from Unprogrammed Friends. In my memory, this was really a rich and wonderful time. Youth Quake nearly achieved Billy's original vision, but it was undercut by the more evangelistic intentions of some evangelical yearly meetings. And I remember having some long, difficult, challenging conversations with some of those folks, and in helping to prevent Youth Quake from being flipped into an evangelistic meeting to try to save the unprogrammed youth. It was a tense time. It was a tense time. I left religious ministry for secular ministry after separating from my wife in 1989 and eventually divorcing. I was still recorded by the Iowa Yearly Meeting for Public Ministry, so I decided I would make my career in nonprofit human services where I could still minister to people. In the early 90s, I also worked part-time in the Ministry of Religious Education with an open and affirming United Church of Christ, and occasionally filled the pulpit for some Compassionate Friends meetings in Iowa, though I was divorced and remarried by that time. I also took on a writing project for the American Friends Service Committee. My second wife was from a weighty Quaker family in New England, from whom I learned much about unprogrammed meetings. We worked together as Midwest field representatives for FWCC for about 3 years at that time. Except for the period of my dark night of the soul, which I wrote about in my spiritual autobiography, I have never seen myself as not being in the ministry since I was 16 years old. I first felt the hand of God in my life when I survived, with only a sprained wrist, an extraordinary farm accident at age 11 that by all rights should have killed me. What I learned at Friends Bible College was that if I were to become a Quaker, my life's work was to be a ministry of service to others, regardless of my career. In 1991, after leaving the Iowa Yearly Meeting, I started working in the fields of teen pregnancy prevention and sexuality education. You might guess correctly that created just a few ripples of dissatisfaction among friends in Iowa. During this period, I co-created a teen pregnancy prevention curriculum and program that was replicated nationally into schools in 23 states. I also helped build, then led, and then returned to lead and rescue the first statewide teen pregnancy prevention organization in the state of Iowa. Now, almost 35 years later, when many other such programs have collapsed under the weight of the current administration, that one is still standing strong. I came to DC in 2005 when I was recruited by the global nonprofit Advocates for Youth to lead their national teen pregnancy prevention work. In that role, I helped build a national network of statewide teen pregnancy prevention organizations. Unfortunately, several have not survived the political changes of the past 10 years. I left Advocates for Youth in 2013 to finish my PhD in nonprofit organizational leadership, and I started a small consultancy to work with small nonprofits. While operating that consultancy, I continued working on a research and writing project with Dr. Ed Saunders, director of the University of Iowa School of Social Work, on organizational and community change. Our work on that project resulted in an approach to organizational sustainability that centered collaborative leadership through what we called ownership-based change. Our work on this resulted in an invitation to a White House meeting with Promise Zone leaders and the university partners during the final months of the Obama administration. Now, I mention these work experiences because these, to me, were expressions of the secular ministry that I entered when I was not able to continue in religious ministry. It has been a satisfying vocation to work with small nonprofits, though not a lucrative vocation, often requiring me to work multiple jobs at the same time just to make a living. Nevertheless, it was in the spirit of what I first learned at Friends Bible College and from other Quakers about making my life a ministry of service, whether it be religious or secular. However, as I understand, friends, today, there's really no spiritually discernible difference between the religious or the sacred and the secular. Clemency and I have now been members of Sandy Spring Friends meeting well over a decade. Perhaps we think as long as 14 or 15 years, but we can't quite remember. Time flies. Now, this really concludes the story of my journey that explains how I came to Quakerism. The why I came to Quakerism is deeply personal and a bit more difficult to explain, but I will try to do so briefly. In Parker Palmer's A Hidden Wholeness, he writes about how people's souls become divided as children when they have to deal with adult pathology. He writes, the truth is that the more dividedness we perceive in each other, the less safe and sane we feel. Dividedness is the result when there are secrets and trauma being covered up, causing people to feel one way on the inside, but for pure survival reasons, act a different way on the outside. Growing up in the Klaus/Miller, was my mother's maiden name, family, was not safe nor sane. And I've come to believe that this was true for generations of the family, of those two families, not just in my time. Dividedness is a systemic phenomenon, and so we all learn to hide the truth through incongruency. For me, this meant knowing something was terribly wrong in my family, but acting as if it was perfectly normal and a healthy family, even to the point of beginning to believe it myself. My sisters did the same, and also they affirmed my delusion by trying to convince me to believe the family really was okay through small but important deceptions. That's kind of what older sisters do, especially when there's such an age difference between you. And you know, I go back home and I am still Tommy. I wish I weren't, but I am still Tommy. And so they were trying to protect Tommy for what they knew awaited him. And so that's why they did that. They loved me and wanted to believe I was not being hurt as they were. It came from good hearts, but it had terrible consequences for me. When I became involved with YFC, I'm going to get just a little bit of coffee here. My throat's a little dry. Golf clubs. When I became involved with YFC and felt called to the ministry, I actually felt my it fed my incongruence, because now I had a code to live by that allowed me to believe that my family was okay because I was acting okay. You see, what I'm trying to say there is that fundamentalism saved my life. It kept me from becoming an alcoholic. It gave me rules to live by that otherwise I would not have had. It had its other problems, of course, but it did, in fact, save my life. When I went to Friends Bible College, I was introduced to the faith and practice of Friends and learned that integrity, which I equate with congruence, was a key tenet. When I ended up in a drug and alcohol treatment center, and if that may come as a surprise to you, unless you have read my spiritual autobiography, when I ended up in a drug and alcohol treatment center for codependency treatment, not drug or alcohol, but codependency, I was introduced to the 12 steps, which finally gave me a strategy for living a more congruent life based in reality. My journey to Quakerism cannot be separated from my journey to congruence, integrity, and sanity. They are one and the same because 50 years ago, I believed I had found in Quakerism the permission and answer on how to become congruent. Now, let's be really honest, though. I have not always found integrity and congruence in Quakerism, which has really tested me at times. And that's why I mention it, is because I find that incongruency, when I encounter it, it becomes a real challenge to me. Psychiatrist M. Scott Peck's book, People of the Lie, helped me understand how that happens. In his book, Peck writes that people can become so misled by what they want to believe that they become deluded into believing it is true. So far in this journey, I'm understanding myself to be a person who is compelled to religiously practice integrity and congruence. For me, it's a matter of my mental and physical health and survival. So have I failed? Absolutely. Absolutely, I have failed at that. Have I failed a lot? Yes, I have failed a lot. But I have to say, but not without deep feelings of guilt and even shame for my failure. Do I keep trying? Yes. Even when it is a bit exasperating to others who have to live and work with me, because I know it can be exasperating. So thanks for listening. I welcome your questions. As you've likely surmised, living congruently means that I hold confidences, but not secrets. So, and I do have, I cut it out because I was a little concerned about the time. I do have also some suggestions or some books that I have found very helpful. One of which is this one, most recently, Quakers and Nazis. I'm returning it to the library today. First 75 pages, must read to understand today. It's very good. Okay, I'm open to questions. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, Tom, I was very impressed by your spiritual autobiography.
Thank you.
And I note that you quoted Tuesdays with Maury
Yes.
several times in there. This was a series which I found very moving and eye-opening for me. I think several of the themes and issues you mentioned in the autobiography resonated with me. And although I was not raised as a fundamentalist, I've dealt with perfectionism my whole life.
Yes.
And feeling less than and trying to make up for it.
Yes.
By trying to be perfect. And I also, at this point in my life, have come to the conclusion that what matters is progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
So I just, anyway, I thank you for
well,
your time.
Thank you. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because friends and I, we were in a meeting at the time that I was there. The leadership was largely based on kind of a Nazarene theology, which is a holiness theology. And of course, a holiness theology kind of pushes you towards striving for that perfection. And so it was a natural fit for me at that time. Although, you know, there comes a point where that just does not work anymore because you actually, a woman created for me at our camp. We had an arts class, and there was an artist there who created this wonderful thing for me. She just doing it for the kids, right? It's on a paper bag, and it's called the Uncommon Prayer. And the gist is that I have strived to be perfect all of my life. I have strived to, you know, and I found that I can't do it, and that is why we need the Savior. And I still have that 40 some years later. It's just, you know, Sheila Schumacher made that for me, and it's just a really wonderful piece. The striving for perfection is really, really tough. And for my family, I was seen as the savior of my family. My dad was a town drunk, and I deal with that on a regular basis at school in such a small town. And I was the one person that was to bring respectability to the family. So there's a wee bit of pressure there, and that I could never live up to. That I could just never live up to. But thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Yeah, Ginny. Uh-oh, here it comes.
I'm Ginny, and I just want to acknowledge what an incredible gift this program is, because we know each other and we eat together and we sit and worship together, but not till we deeply share that we have this whole access to each other's spiritual health. So I met you when you were writing Circle of Life on Ministry and Counsel back in 2016.
We don't know for sure.
Amazed. I knew you were a great man. But when I read the spiritual biography and I've listened to you today, you know why you're a great man. Because you have cared and you've struggled and evolved and you surrendered and you never gave up. And I'm so grateful to know your backstory. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. My first inclination is to say, trust me, I'm not great. I know myself pretty well, and I'm not great, and I have several people that can testify to the fact that I'm not. But thank you. That's very sweet. I appreciate it. And I think that we all suffered from the pandemic here, and it really broke a lot of connections for folks, and it I know for us it made it very difficult for us to be in meeting. And we did finally we found a home in the 9 a.m. Zoom meeting, and really so deeply appreciate the people that are there. And don't let anybody tell you you can't build relationship on Zoom. You can. It just takes a little longer, and it takes a little more work. But it was really it's really wonderful to have that to keep us connected to the meeting, especially now that we're out in the hinterlands of Frederick, right? So, other comments, questions? Yeah. Hey, Linda, how you doing? No problem.
Timing. You have spent time this morning telling us about your insights with your personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time, Tom, we all have benefited from your ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have, especially when I have been in utter pain, which you know. You have reacted instantly. And you have supported me continuously in spoken words and in writing. You attend to my need. And that to me is what a Quaker does. It's quite simple, but it takes time, practice, will, intention, and love. And you exhibit those. It has nothing to do with perfect. It has to do with who we are and what we do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeremy.
This is a non-technical question.
Okay.
So you mentioned this is your spiritual journey so far. So I'm
Yes.
curious what you kind of see for yourself going forward, or what you want in the next stage.
So I mentioned that while I was in treatment for codependency, I was introduced to the 12 steps. And I think, as I see it, there is still some repair that I need to do. I lost a lot of relationships in my dark soul of the night. And I know that I did because of actions that I took. And there, I think some of them, I'm coming to realize that some of them are beyond repair. Some of them may still be repairable. And I hope so. But one of my favorite scriptures has always been out of the book of Romans, where the gist of it is, in as much as possible, be at peace with all people. And that's how I've tried to be, not always successfully, because I find that I have inherited my mother's tendency for anger and holding on to things, but which has been probably one of my greatest life's challenges, to let go of those things. But if where it is still possible for me to be at peace with some people in my life, I would very much like to be able to do that. For me, that's a bit of a spiritual quest at this time. As I, I'll be. So I know many of you here are older than me, I get it, okay? But I'm feeling older every day. I'm going to be 72 in April. And so I realize that my time on this earth is coming to a close. And I would very much like to be at peace with the people that I know that I have harmed in that time. Good, really good question. Gee, thank you. Maria?
Yeah, I'm curious. Wondering, how are you processing the events of today in the world?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's why I was wandering through the meeting house several months ago. I think actually trustees were on kitchen duty at that time, and this book just caught my attention. I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of the author. Turns out he's a historian from Nebraska, or he passed away about 15 years ago. That book has been very helpful to me in understanding some of the context of today. What I believe is happening is that we're seeing the playbook from Nazi Germany being implemented. And it's like, we don't, gee whiz, this would really happen. Well, yeah, because it's already happened once and there is a playbook. And it strikes me that we are seeing that playbook. And the response to Quakers was really quite unique in it. And they did something that no other church did, not even the Mennonites in Germany. Every other church acquiesced to the Nazis in Germany. The Quakers did not, but they paid a price. And but how they acquiesced was really quite clever in many regards. An SS officer did a study of them, and he came back and reported that Quakers are a Christian sect that do the most illegal things in the most legal ways. But we have to understand what illegal at that time was. It was not the actual laws of the land that Germany had been founded upon. It was the rule of the Nazis. And so were they acting illegally? Not really. They were acting legally, but it was against what the Nazis were trying to impose. So I found weird comfort in reading this, except it also exacerbated some of my anxiety about what's going on. I think we are going down a road that has already been traveled back in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I assess it right now, but can we cut that part out? No. I don't want anybody coming to my house in the middle of the night. Kathy.
I wanted to comment that, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago or so, our younger son and his wife were living in Berlin, maybe 15 years ago. And we all visited a very small Berlin Quaker meeting, which is difficult to find. You have to really want to go there. And some of the members had started meeting in people's houses when they were pre-teens, and they were still alive now at that meeting. And to listen to some of their stories, they had to move. They would meet at this house 1 week or 1 month, and then they had to meet some other place in secrecy. So your comment about oppression and yet the will to express your soul to other people really struck me.
Thank you.
And also what you said about trying to rectify relationships. That's not perfection, that's progress.
Yeah, and I think it's the right thing to do as well. It's the right way to try to live. At least for me, it is. Yeah. I thought I saw a hand over this way too. Oh, Jonathan, okay.
4 minutes. You have, you're kind of a rare bird to wander through fundamentalism and evangelicism.
Uh-huh.
And, various strands of Quakerism that I don't think too many of us have any contact with, in all honesty, other than through literature. And I just wondered if there's something you miss now that you're entrenched in liberal, progressive, unprogrammed Quakerism, if you think there's something you missed from the other iterations or things we should be, things we can admire from those other variations.
Interesting question. This is going to sound odd, but what I have experienced among unprogrammed friends is a stronger bias against evangelical friends than I experienced among evangelical friends toward unprogrammed friends. I've been fascinated by that. That just doesn't compute for me. And that's just, my experience. Others maybe haven't experienced that, but just, I've been close to Royce Frazier for many, many years, who just retired from Berkeley College. In fact, did a little work for Berkeley College over the last few years. And he has welcomed on campus there people from all across Quakerism. And I'm not sure that I would always see that happening among unprogrammed friends. But I also know Royce well, and I know how he thinks. He has the things he has to do as a college president, and then there's things that how he really feels. But yeah, I think that would be one thing that has been kind of surprising to me a little bit. There was no fighting with the evangelical oriented friends against Billy's vision until one yearly meeting. Very powerful yearly meeting stepped up and said no. Everybody was very, very pleased to do that. One thing I want to say, as I mentioned in here, the sojourning in white Christian nationalism. This is a realization that I've come to only over the last 2 or 3 years, and understanding that that's really what we were caught up in. My friend Lamar Roth, whom I mentioned, we do a twice-a-month podcast called Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. It's about civil dialogue. We have decided recently that we have to talk about what we experienced among white Christian nationalism and the nationalists that we were with, because that played a significant role in both of our lives, and one that we look back on now and we just shake our head and say, how in the world did we find ourselves there? So we think probably the next few months we're probably going to devote a podcast to talking about our experience hanging out with the Jerry Falwells of the world.
Thanks for watching our video. For more content from Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, click to subscribe.